Witch in Charm's Way, a cozy mystery audiobook, written and narrated by R.K. Dreaming. Part 34. Chapter 19, Trickery and Confessions. We didn't have time to think up a plan because within 5 minutes a knock sounded on the front door of the castle. Allegra and Jasper went to open it. They returned with Oberon, Lorcan, Petra and Paolo. They were all here, and one of them was the killer. It was time to do or die. Lorcan firmly shut the door of the lounge behind himself after they had all come in, as if he was paranoid that someone would interrupt us. He didn't need to be so worried. It was nearing lunchtime, and the cafe was busy, which meant that Aunt Adele was busy serving her customers. It was Sunday, and weekends were her busiest times, when everyone was out on the beach having fun and visiting the cafe. "We won't be disturbed," I reassured the 4 of them. Petra's face was pale. She came to take a stance next to Oberon and crossed her arms stiffly over her chest. She licked her lips nervously. "Why did you ask us to come here?" Lorcan's eyes flicked nervously from me to Jasper to Allegra, who had both come to stand beside me. "Jasper, what did you mean that you'd found something to do with Lily's murder?" he demanded. Lorcan looked tense. He had his hand in his pocket where I knew his wand was. Allegra had hers in her wand pocket too. I didn't want this to turn into a duel. "We've got something we need to talk to you all about," I said to them. "Something urgent, but I can tell that you're all feeling tense about it, so why don't you all take a seat and we can have a chat?" The 4 of them stood there, staring at me. Lorcan shook his head. He didn't want to take a seat. Clearly, neither did the others. "Just get on with it," said Oberon. Petra glanced at the door like she was afraid of what she might hear, and she wanted to get out of here. "I don't want this to turn into anything heated," I said, "and Aunt Adele will be mad if this turns into another Westbrim and Hardwick family issue. So, out of consideration for her, let's just all put our wands away, shall we?" I had deliberately avoided using the words fight and duel, afraid this might make things worse. I did it first, taking my wand out of my pocket and putting it on the coffee table. I knew, of course, that this meant very little since I was the least dangerous wand-bearer in the room. Allegra followed my lead and took her wand out of her pocket too, but she looked hard at Lorcan before she made any move to put hers down. When he grudgingly put his on the table, she did too. "Excellent," I said in a light voice. "Now that's what I call a show of trust. If only everyone in our families could behave that way." Lorcan didn't chuckle. "Just get on with it," he bit out. "It's past lunchtime. We haven't got all day." "You want me to get some snacks from the kitchen?" I offered. Hangriness wasn't going to make things any easier for anyone. My brain was thinking fast, trying to figure out a way to find out who the killer was and get them to confess. Taking a break to go to the kitchen was just what I needed. It would buy us extra time. But Lorcan shook his head. "We're not hungry. Jasper said you guys had something important to talk to us about. What is it?" I sighed. I might as well get on with it. I picked up the wooden box from the coffee table. I had put the murder weapon into it. Opening the lid, I showed them what was inside. Petra leaned in close to look. When she saw what it was, she gave a gasp and a cry of disgust and backed away. Lorcan and Paolo looked similarly disgusted. "What the heck is it?" said Petra. "Where did you get it?" said Oberon, his face gone pale and rigid. It was an expression I could not read. His eyes were wild, though. I knew that he had smelled Lily's blood on it. He could smell the differences between blood as well as I could, probably much better. He was breathing fast, almost hyperventilating, like an angry bull. He couldn't seem to take his eyes off it, and his hands had bunched into fists, tightly clenched. Whether from disgust or rage or heartbreak, I did not know. Or guilt. Please don't let it be guilt. "I think you can guess what it is," I told them all. "We found it in the castle outhouse. It must have been in the garden when Lily was there. The murderer dropped it." Oberon gave a cry of dismay. Petra reached out to clutch his hand, but he shook her off. He was shaking, unable to take his eyes off the box and the murder weapon inside it. "You're saying that the person who murdered Lily used that to do it," he said in a wild voice, "that they left that in your garden with her body?" I nodded. "I'm sorry, Oberon. I know it's upsetting, but..." I sighed deeply. "We wanted to speak to you four before we went to the police, to give you a chance to explain." "Explain?" snapped Lorcan. "Explain what? You think one of us did it, don't you?" He looked furious, and like he was going to charge out of the door. Darn it, I had messed up, and now the others had thrown me filthy looks and had turned to follow him. "You all came here tonight, didn't you?" I said quickly. "Because you four know something. Or one of you does." Lorcan's hand was already on the door handle, but he hesitated at that, and looked nervously at his friends. From their shocked glances at each other, it looked like they were all wondering if one of them did know something. I had got their attention. I continued, "We thought that whoever put Lily in the garden must have been trying to frame me. So they must have known about the argument that Lily and I had. Only you four knew that." "And James, that werewolf," spat Lorcan. "James is gone," said Allegra. "He left town. I couldn't find him." Lorcan swore, calling James a nasty word. "And somebody has alibied James," I said. "They saw him somewhere else and said it couldn't have been him." "Who?" demanded Paolo. "Maybe he paid them off." "I can't tell you who," I said. "The point is that it left the four of you. Maybe you guys told someone about the argument I had with Lily? At the very least, you four knew about it, and we didn't want the police to leap to conclusions and point the finger at the wrong person." "Especially you, Oberon," said Jasper. "You were close to Lily, and you know what people in this town think about vampires. When we found that weapon, I said we should go to the police straight away, but Esme wanted to hear you all out. She didn't think the police would give you a fair shot at explaining things." "You think it was me?" Oberon said angrily. I shook my head. "I hope not. I don't want it to be you." I hoped that he could see in my eyes that I meant this truthfully. "It wasn't Oberon," said Petra hotly. "How can you even say that?" "But how can you know that, Petra?" I asked. "You said that you and Paolo left Club Nocturne together, and then Lorcan and Oberon left Lily there alone, so you don't know that it wasn't Oberon." Petra's face flushed with anger. "I know it wasn't Oberon. I've known him since we were children. He would never. And if you're going to accuse just anyone, I'm surprised you didn't start with Lorcan. Everyone knows that you Westbrims hate the Hardwicks." "That body was found in your garden," said Paolo, putting his arm around his sister's shoulder to comfort her. "And you say that the murder weapon was found there too. Who's to say it wasn't you who did it?" "That's why you called us here, isn't it?" said Lorcan with narrowed eyes. "You didn't want to go to the police because you know that they'll think it was you. It was you who argued with Lily that night." At Lorcan's words, Allegra's face went pale with anger. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, her eyes flicking to her wand as if she wished she could pick it up. Hi, you've reached the end. Comment the code words "Inspector Gadget knew it too" to confuse everyone who hasn't reached this part of the story yet. And thanks for playing along.